Thanks for bearing with us, everyone, but we wanted to take care of those issues before we got started. The next item on the agenda is the hearing on the protest of the independent candidacy of Francis Cicchinelli Jr. In that regard, the protest against the nominating petition to the candidacy of Francis A. Cicchinelli Jr. for the office of mayor of the city of Madison, Ohio, was filed by 4 people, 2 which have withdrawn, and currently Bob Richards and Ted Scheiger are 2 of the party protesters. And on the 10th day of July, for purposes of housekeeping, on the 10th of July 2015, 2 of the party protesters, Tony Townsend and Shadrick Stinson, withdrew from the protest. Before we get started, the first item to consider is the recusal motion filed by the candidate's lawyer. In this particular protest, the attorney for the candidate filed a motion to recuse myself and member Scheer. This motion to recuse was filed June 11, 2015. This was 5 days before any protest was filed by Attorney Oki on behalf of the protesters. This motion was a preemptive attempt to cast doubt on myself and member Scheer and the board. Not only is this motion without merit, it is not based on any facts of bias or prejudice. Subsequently, a protest was filed, and the candidate's lawyer filed a supplemental memorandum alleging Tony Townsend and Shadrick Stinson are current members of the Stark County Democratic Party's Executive Committee. There are approximately, I think, 75 members in that committee. The attorney for the candidate suggests that since we are all Democrats, we should recuse ourselves. To take this theory further, a judge then would have to recuse himself for all cases in which a lawyer appears who is in the same bar association. The attorney for the candidate filed a second supplemental motion, again not alleging any specific facts or evidence that myself and member Scheer would be prejudiced or biased to his client. Therefore, I would indicate that myself and board member Scheer were not at the Stark County Executive Committee meeting where it was determined that the local Democratic Party would support the protest to the candidacy of Francis Cicchinelli. In fact, the Stark County Democratic Party or Executive Committee were never protesters in this particular case and never joined in the action currently pending before this board. Moreover, protesters Stinson and Townsend have withdrawn as party protesters. Member Scheer and myself never appeared and never participated in any discussion or vote of the Stark County Democratic Executive Committee. The nature of the Board of Elections in all 88 counties in the state of Ohio is to sit in judgment of matters that affect people in Mr. Scheer and I's Democratic Party, as well as the Republican Party, as Member Klein and Member Brady do. In this protest case, we sit as quasi-judicial authority, and we have to be cognizant of the due process for all involved. In order for a recusal motion to be sustained, there has to be some showing of bias or prejudice, some denial of due process. I have no interest in the outcome of this protest. I harbor no prejudice or bias in this matter. I therefore find that the candidate's motion to recuse myself has not been taken, and I'll let Member Scheer talk about his response.
Basically, not to rehash what Chairman Ferruccio just stated, but at this time, I have no intention of recusing myself on this board. And I believe, as far as having a fair hearing can be accomplished.
With that, that motion is denied. The next item is then for the procedure for today. We'll first hear from the protesters as their case in chief, and crossed by the candidate's lawyer, and then questions from any board members if they have any, and then the candidate's case in chief. As far as the issues, I believe there's one basic issue, and that is that the protesters contend candidate Cicchinelli is pursuant to Ohio Revised Code 3501.01, subparagraph 1, and Ohio Revised Code 3513.257. And relevant case law he was not actually unaffiliated or disaffiliated from the Democratic Party when he signed or submitted his independent candidate nominating petitions. And his claim of unaffiliation from the Democratic Party was not made in good faith. Is that accurate depiction of the issue?
Yes.
Okay.
Not my issue, so I don't have one.
Okay. So any opinion is waived with respect to that issue. So no other additions or corrections. If not, both sides are familiar with protest hearings. And I know that as chairman, I want you to know as chairman, I have authority to exercise reasonable control over the examination of witnesses and prevent either counsel from questioning which is not relevant to the issues. This board is to consider or is cumulative or repetitive, argumentative, or considered harassment of a witness. The protesters have the burden of proceeding first and proving their case by clear and convincing evidence. For the record, this board will incorporate by reference all evidence for and against the protest for each party protester. I would now entertain a short opening, 5 minutes max for each.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the Board of Elections Committee, I'm Steve Oakey, appearing on behalf of Ted Skartiger, I believe is the pronunciation, Ted Skartiger and Bob Richards. And we are protesting the nominating petition filed by Francis H. Cicchinelli, Jr. as an alleged independent candidate for the office of Mayor of Massillon. This board may be relieved to hear that the merits of the protest are not measured by the length of the presentation. And our issues in this case are straightforward, and our presentation will be straightforward as well. In the race, gentlemen, for the mayor of Massillon in 2015, Mr. Cicchinelli has affirmatively stated, under the penalty of the felony of election falsification, he's affirmatively stated that he is a Democrat. And he did so, and he made that statement when he signed the Democratic petition for the office of mayor of Mr. James Ress, who was an unsuccessful candidate for the Democratic Party for the office of mayor of Massillon. It was interesting to hear some of the discussion during one of the earlier agenda items about intent of someone, in that case, the intent of someone signing or circulating a petition. And I think when Mr. Cicchinelli, in relation to the race for mayor of the city of Massillon, signed a Democratic petition, it was his intent to inject himself in relation to that race as a Democrat. Now, for the very same race of mayor, and in the same election cycle, he's now claiming that he's an independent. Mr. Cicchinelli can't be both. In relation to one race and one election cycle, you can't be both a Democrat and an independent. It's not possible. You can't be both. And by first saying that he's a Democrat in relation to this race for mayor, and then claiming that he is an independent for the same race and in the same election cycle, we believe that Mr. Cicchinelli has himself proven by clear and convincing evidence. Conclusively, we believe that his claim of independence is not in good faith. Therefore, his petition should be disqualified. We believe that Mr. Cicchinelli has also flip-flopped in his affiliation, starting off this election cycle as a Democrat, and then trying to become an independent, and then flipping back to be a Democrat again, and then ultimately, just, I believe, 5 days before the filing deadline, claiming to be an independent once again. All again in the same cycle, and all again for the not in good faith. So, for those two reasons, first of all, saying for the race of mayor that he's a Democrat, and then trying to go back off that for the same race and then the same cycle, and for flip-flopping back and forth twice, we believe that this Board of Elections should invalidate Mr. Cicchinelli's petition, be disqualified from appearing on the ballot for mayor of the city of Massillon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Oakley. Mr. Thomas?
In the interest of brevity, I would just refer the board to my client's memorandum of contract for protest, which was filed with this board on June 22, 2015. I think it rather succinctly sums up the issue. Bottom line, as the United States Supreme Court has held, the right of affiliation with the party includes the right of disaffiliation. The fact that Mr. Cicchinelli signed somebody's Democratic primary petition in January of this year doesn't have anything to do with his post-petition activity. He files his petition 4 or 5 months later. Basically, I've changed my mind. I no longer want to be a Democrat. That is constitutionally appropriate and permissible. And although the case law seems to imply that this board may look at pre-petition activity, I suppose for purposes of what was yesterday and what's today, and was the umbilical cord properly cut, the primary emphasis in all of the case law is what happens on and after you file your petition. And of course, the most obvious problem for such a candidate, and I think this board has dealt with it, maybe is going to deal with it again, is a candidate that says on Monday before the primary, I'm an independent, and then on Tuesday is foolish enough to vote on a partisan ballot. Well, that's pretty crystal clear. That didn't happen here. Nothing close to that happened here. Mr. Cicchinelli is qualified, and this board should so find. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Thomas. First witness.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, we call Mr. Cicchinelli.
Good morning, sir. Good morning. Mr. Cicchinelli, for our record, would you please state your name and address, sir?
Francis H. Cicchinelli, Jr., 2105 Cypress Drive, Southeast Massillon.
Mr. Cicchinelli, as you've heard the introductions a few minutes ago, I'm be appearing on behalf of the protesters here this morning, sir, and I'll be asking you some questions. If any of my question doesn't make sense or you need it repeated, please let me know, sir, okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, sir. Mr. Cicchinelli, could you please tell this Board of Elections what is the date that you claim you were first an independent?
Technically, it would be the May primary when I voted non-issues, non-partisan ballot.
That would have been, the May primary would have been, I believe, May 5th?
5th.
Tuesday, May 5th, sir?
Yes.
All right. Now, sir, is it correct, Mr. Cicchinelli, that you used your affiliation with the Democratic Party to help a fellow Democrat, Mr. James Ress, get on the primary ballot in the race for mayor in 2015?
No.
Well, sir, there's an exhibit book right to your left there, sir. And I'd like to direct your attention to Exhibit 3, Tab 3. It's just 2 pages of that document, sir. Do you have that in front of you, Mr. Cicchinelli?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I'll represent to you, sir, that this is a declaration of candidacy, party primary election, filed with the Board of Elections. It appears on the timestamp that it was February 3rd, 2015. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, Mr. Cicchinelli, this petition and declaration of candidacy indicates that it was for the name of James D. Ress, correct?
Correct.
And Mr. Ress was running for mayor of the city of Massillon, correct?
Yes.
You're running for the mayor, the office of mayor of Massillon Currently, that's your desire, is that correct?
Yes.
And this petition, Exhibit 3, also indicates that Mr. Ress was running as a member of the Democratic Party, correct?
Yes.
And there are a number of signatures down at the lower portion of Exhibit 3, Mr. Cicchinelli. Do you see those?
Yes.
And above those signatures, do you see where it says, in somewhat small type, but I'll read it, and you read along, okay? Signatures on this petition should be from only one county and must be written in ink. Signatures on this petition shall be of persons who are of the same political party as stated above by the candidate. Have I read that correctly, sir?
Yes.
And the political party of the candidate as stated above was Democrat, correct?
Yes.
And do you see in signature block number 1 a signature there, sir?
Yes.
And whose signature is that?
That's my signature.
All right, so for the race for mayor in 2015, the candidacy of Mr. James Ress, by signing this, you indicated to this Board of Elections and to the public, Mr. Cicchinelli, that you're a member of the Democratic Party. Is that correct?
Not really.
Well, sir, you're familiar with the language on the petition. It says whoever commits election falsification is guilty of a felony of the 5th degree. You're aware of that obligation when you sign these petitions, right?
Yes.
And certainly, Mr. Cicchinelli, you have a long history of experience as a Democratic office holder and a candidate on numerous occasions for offices in the city of Massillon. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And I'm sure that you probably couldn't count all the times you had to look at and deal with these petitions, right?
Yes.
And are you familiar then, Mr. Cicchinelli, with the requirement as indicated on this petition that signatures, the people who sign it, have to be of the same political party as stated by the candidate? Were you familiar with that requirement?
Yes.
And again, Mr. Cicchinelli, your signature on that petition so indicates that you're of the same political party as Mr. Ress. Is that fair?
At the time of the signature, yes.
All right. And that, again, that party was Democratic, correct?
Correct.
Now, Mr. Cicchinelli, for the same office of mayor in the same year, 2015, you're telling this Board of Elections that you're not a Democrat, you're an independent. Is that what you're telling us, sir?
Yes.
Mr. Cicchinelli, I'd like to very briefly, and your reputation in the community, sir, in your long-term service in the city of Massillon are well known, but for our record, in case somebody's reading this down the road, they may not have ever known you, and they won't know your service, so I'd like to cover that briefly with you, sir. You ran and were elected as a Democrat to Massillon City Council for, I think, 14 years, is that correct?
Correct.
You remember the first year that you ran and got elected as a Democrat to City Council?
Yes.
What year was that, sir?
November 1973.
All right. And then 14 years through that, you then bring into 1987 when you first ran as a Democrat for mayor of Massillon. Is that correct, sir?
Correct.
And then the second time you ran as a Democrat and were elected was 1991?
Correct.
And then similarly, you ran as a Democrat and were was elected in 95, 99, 2003, and 2007. Is that correct?
Yes.
Ran as a Democrat, served your full term as a Democrat. Is that correct?
Yes.
And in 2011, you ran a 7th time for mayor, again as a Democrat. Is that correct?
Yes.
And on that election, you were not successful in that particular election. You were defeated in the Democratic primary. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Cicchinelli, referring you to Exhibit 1, tab 1, the red tab in your binder there, does that appear to you, sir, to be a certificate of registration for you with this Board of Elections?
Yes, sir.
And very briefly, Mr. Cicchinelli, does it indicate, Exhibit 1, that you voted in the Democratic primary in the years 2006, 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010, 2011, 2012, and 2014?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. I'd like to refer your attention, Mr. Cicchinelli, to Exhibit 7. That's the blue tab. Sir, do you recognize that as a declaration of candidacy for, I believe, your wife, Joy Cicchinelli?
No, no. You say 7? I'm sorry. Oh,
Yes, sir, 7.
I'm sorry. Yes,
Okay. I think you were at 6 there for a moment.
Yes, sir.
Okay, no problem. That appears to be a declaration of candidacy and petition for your wife, Joy Cicchinelli. Is that correct?
that's correct.
And she was running for the Stark County Central Committee as a member of the Democratic Party. Is that right?
Yes,
And it appears on the second page of that document, sir, that you were the first signer of your wife's petition. Is that right?
yes,
Mr. Cicchinelli, again, that language above the signature blocks, again, indicates that you have to be if you're going to sign the petition, you have to be of the same political party as the candidate. Is that right?
yes,
So, would it be fair to say, Mr. Cicchinelli, that if we would start talking about the year 2014, you were a Democrat, correct?
yes,
Is it true, Mr. Cicchinelli, that sometime in late 2014, early 2015, sir, you first started collecting signatures on a petition to run for the office of mayor as an independent?
yes.
And did your wife, Joy, assist you in approaching a number of people to sign your petition to run for mayor as an independent? In
Yes.
late 2014, early 2015?
Yes.
And do you have a recollection of how many signatures you may have collected, sir?
I believe 155.
Okay. And did you ever file those petitions that you started circulating in 2014, early 2015?
Yes, we filed those.
When did you start circulating those, sir?
The date actually escapes me, but I'm thinking January, February, something like that.
Well, Mr. Cicchinelli, I'll indicate to you that we've inquired and find that there's no record of petitions filed by you in January or February.
Oh, when I filed the petition? Or when I circulated?
Well, when do you circulate it? When did you start? Let me clarify. That's one of those examples, Mr. Cicchinelli, where my question maybe wasn't very clear. I apologize. Let me start over. When did you indicate you started circulating petitions in January or February, is that right?
That's inaccurate. It was later on,
It was later on?
like in April.
Mr. Cicchinelli, my question is then, stretching back to late 2014, early 2015, did you or did you not begin collecting signatures on petitions to run as an independent for mayor of Massillon?
Yes.
But then, referring to Exhibit 3, again, sir, if you could have that in front of you, that's the petition of Mr. James Ress for the Democratic nomination for mayor of Massillon, correct?
Correct.
And do you see your signature on that petition, sir?
Yes.
And what is the date that you signed that petition?
1/21/15.
Okay. So as of January 21st, 2015, you were again a Democrat, is that right?
Registered Democrat. Yes.
And if I can refer you to Exhibit 6. Is that the petition for Councilwoman Jill Kramer?
Yes.
And she was running as a Democrat for Massillon City Council, is that correct?
Yes.
And the first signature on that document is your signature, is that correct?
Yes.
January 23, 2015 looks like the date that you signed that, is that right?
Yes.
So as of January 23, 2015, for this petition, you were a Democrat, is that right?
Yes.
And then referring you to Exhibit 5, Mr. Cicchinelli. Do you have that, sir?
Yes.
And is this a petition for Mr. Paul Manson running for Massillon City Council as a Democrat?
Yes.
And I believe if I could refer you to the second page of Exhibit 5. I think signature block 13. Do you see that, sir?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, and is that your signature on Mr. Manson's petition?
Yes.
And so and I believe the date of that is January 31st, 2015?
Yes.
And so as of January 31st, 2015, you're a Democrat, is that right?
Yes. Yes.
And referring you then to Exhibit 4. That's the yellow tab. That's another part petition for Mr. Manson, is that right?
Yes.
Again, Mr. Manson running for City Council in Massillon as a Democrat, is that right?
Yes.
And looking at the second page of that Exhibit 4, Mr. Cicchinelli, you actually circulated that petition for Mr. Manson, is that right?
Yes.
And in your circulator statement, it specifically says, I, Francis H. Cicchinelli, Jr., declare under penalty of election falsification that I reside at the address appearing below my signature, that I am a member of the Democratic Party. You see that, sir?
Yes.
Now, it looks on Exhibit 4, Mr. Cicchinelli, that you collected signatures up through February 2nd of 2015. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
And then this document, looking at the first page, appears that it was filed the next day on February 3rd, 2015. Is that right?
Yes.
Mr. Cicchinelli, would you agree with me then that at least for that exhibit up through February 3rd, 2015, you're a Democrat, is that right?
Registered Democrat, yes.
All right. Now, Mr. Cicchinelli, I'd like to refer your attention to Exhibit 2, which is the orange tab. And sir, do you recognize that exhibit, which has, I believe, 20 pages? That is your petition that's at issue in this protest. That's your petition where you're claiming to be an independent and you are running for the office of mayor of the city of Massillon in 2015. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
It appears from my review of your petition, Mr. Cicchinelli, that you and people who were assisting you started collecting signatures on this new set of petitions on April 29th, 2015. Mr. Cicchinelli, I'll have you go through that briefly, and I'll represent you, sir, that was the earliest date that I saw on your petition was April 29th, 2015. And if you'd like to take a glance at that, let me know if you find an earlier date, sir.
Yes. You are correct.
Okay, and that was, I believe, the deadline for filing your petition was the day before the primary. Is that right?
Yes.
The primary being May 5th, so the deadline the day before would be May 4th. Is that right, sir?
Yes.
And Mr. Cicchinelli, so it appears if you started collecting the signatures on these petitions on April 29th, that's just 5 days before that May 4th filing deadline for this petition. Is that correct?
Yes.
Mr. Cicchinelli, you indicated that you started collecting signatures on your independent petition in January or February of 2015. What happened to those petitions, sir?
That was an inaccurate statement. This is accurate here. It was in April.
I'm a little confused because you told us on, I think, 2 occasions that you started collecting them, didn't file it, but started collecting them in January, February of 2015.
No, that,
Objection argument is that he's already he was confused, and I think he's correct in that answer twice. Of course, the exhibits was correct. Say that dates of signatures.
I'm just trying to clarify the testimony, Mr. Ferruccio, because I think it is confusing.
Right. Proceed.
Okay. My question, Mr. Cicchinelli, was, and I'm be candid with you, I feel confused because you said a couple of times that you started collecting signatures on your petitions in January, February of 2015, understanding that you didn't file them until later. Was that your testimony earlier?
one time I said that and I corrected myself. The record shows that it was in April that the actual petitions were circulated.
Are you denying that you circulated petitions earlier than in April?
Yes,
Mr. Cicchinelli, last question for you, sir. Would you agree with me that you can't be both a Democrat and an independent for the same office in the same election year?
yes.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Chairman, that's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Mr. Oakley.
Thank you, sir.
I didn't get an opportunity to check with that last question. Obviously, calls for conclusion. Board objections to stand and suggest that answer be stricken for one's legal now.
Overruled.
Also, I want to state for the record my client's continuing objection to the participation of Messrs. Ferruccio and Shear for reasons stated.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Conley, as a point of procedure, how will the board be proceeding? Will Mr. Conley be questioning his client this time following my cross-examination, or will that be part of his case? Recognizing this discretion of the board.
Recognizing that Mr. Conley gets to choose his methodology, whether I can question him now or later or both, I believe is within my discretion. I, of course, reserve the right to call him my case in chief, as Mr. Ferruccio indicated earlier. I just have a few questions now.
You can proceed.
Thank you,
Mr. Cicchinelli, looking at Mr. Oakey's Exhibit 2, that 20-some pages or whatever it is that he said it is, just as a point of clarification, the earliest signature date on any of those petitions is May 29, 2015.
Yes.
I think.
Did I say May? I mean April,
I think
I'm
you mean
sorry.
April.
April 29, 2015.
April 29, yes.
By the way, did you ever take a blood oath, such as the Nazi Party required in Germany? Did you ever take a blood oath upon penalty of death? I will always be a Democrat, by God. Did you ever take such an oath?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to object to the scurrilous statements of Mr. Conley invoking the Nazi Party. I think it's debasing of these procedures and, quite frankly, disgrace.
Sustained.
Did you ever take a blood oath, with or without the Nazi Party involvement? Did you ever take a blood oath to always be a Democrat?
No.
And you basically changed your mind and said you're no longer a Democrat?
Yes.
I'll reserve my other questions for my case in chief.
Thank you.
Mr. Oakley.
No further questions.